How to sell your property with a tenant in situ in Scotland. So let's talk about something I get asked all the time by landlords across Scotland. We make multiple calls to landlords looking to sell, looking to buy, and one of the questions we do get asked a lot is, can I sell my property if I've got a tenant in place? The short answer, yes, you absolutely can. You can sell a property in Scotland with a tenant in situ. You do not need to evict them to do so, but there are a few key things you need to understand before you go down that road, because selling a tenanted property isn't quite the same as selling an empty one. Now, we deal with this scenario all the time at Smart Sales and Investments. In fact, a big part of what we do is help landlords who want to exit or cash in without the stress of going through the eviction process. So in this video, I'm going to break down how selling a tenanted property actually works in Scotland, the reality around pricing and rent levels, and exactly how we handle it step by step at Smart Sales and Investments. So yes, you can sell with a tenant in situ. First things first, let's clear up the big myth. You can sell a property with a tenant still living there. You do not need to evict. There's no law in Scotland that says you need to evict before you sell. The key thing is, the buyer simply takes over the tenancy agreement and the tenant continues to live there as normal. Now, most of the time, these sales are investor to investor, meaning we're selling to another landlord who's happy to take on the tenant and start collecting the rent from day one. That's where we come in, because we've got one of the biggest active investor databases in the country. Over 30,000 registered buyers, many of whom looking specifically for tenanted stock. So the communication with the tenant is key as well. Now, it's best to let the tenant know that the property is being sold. Yes, in most cases, it's better to be upfront and transparent. When the tenant's aware and cooperative, the process is so much smoother. Access for viewings, updates, it keeps everybody on side. That said, if there's a situation where you'd rather keep things quiet, for example, just selling privately to another investor, you can do that too. The key thing is you've got options, and we tailor the approach depending on the situation. Now, here's where a bit of realism needs to come in when selling a tenanted property. We often speak to landlords who have had the same tenant for 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20 years, and they've never increased the rent. I do get it, the rent's been paid on time, the tenant's been really good, you don't want to upset the tenant, so you don't increase the rent, but that causes real issues when you come to sell, especially if it's 10 or 20 years down the line. So from a sales point of view, it can make things really difficult. We are always honest and open about that. Sometimes it means finding a balance between what you'd like to get and what makes sense for the buyer, looking at the yield, the cash flow, etc. So I'll tell you a little bit about our process and how we work when we are selling tenanted properties. So at Smart Sales and Investments, we've developed a really clear process for handling this. Step 1 is try to sell with the tenant in situ. We'll first look at the property exactly as it is, the numbers, the yield, etc., the tenant in place, the current rent. We'll market it directly to our investor database and network of buyers who are actively looking for tenanted stock. We can also take the property on the market onto Rightmove and Zoopla. Gives it maximum exposure and a high chance of getting the max price as well. Step 2, we may need to look at a rent review, so the rent review option. If we find that the current rent is too low for the market, we're just not getting any offers, nobody biting, we'll discuss the options with you, and if appropriate, offer a rent increase to bring closer to market value before we relaunch. Your letting agency may need to do that for you, or you may need to do that if you are self-managing. Sometimes even a modest increase can make the numbers far more appealing to the buyers. And step 3, eviction as a last resort. We don't want to be evicting tenants, of course. Unfortunately, there's cases where neither option works. Step 1 and step 2 just do not work. Maybe the tenant's not cooperative, or the rent situation just makes the property unviable for buyers. In those cases, eviction may be required. And although that's never the first choice, at the end of the day, you as the landlord own the property, and you're entitled to make the best financial decision for yourself. With all the new legislation, rising costs, many landlords are now finding themselves making a loss, so it's about finding the right exit in the right way. So just to recap, yes, you can sell your property in Scotland with a tenant in place. You don't need to evict, and in many cases it can actually be smoother and a faster route, especially if you're working with a company like ours that already has serious investors lined up and has the exit option of taking it on the market as well. The key thing to keep in mind, Be realistic about pricing, communicate openly with your tenant if possible, and work with someone who understands the investor side of the market. So if you're a landlord in Scotland and you're thinking about selling your tenanted property, or you just want some honest advice on your options, get in touch with us here at Smart Sales and Investments. We'll give you a free, no obligation chat about your property, talk you through what it could sell for, and help you figure out the best route for you. So whether that's keeping the tenant in situ, increasing the rent, or selling on the open market, whatever it is, we are here to help. You can get in contact with us on our website, smartsalesandinvestments.com, social media, on the phone, whatever it is. If you're a landlord watching this video and you have a tenanted property to sell or a portfolio of tenanted properties, we can help you. So we'll hopefully speak to you soon. I hope you've took some value from this video, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.